Hey, thanks for tuning in. In this video, we're going to talk about assuming edits to the Torah. So the assumption that the law must have been edited to say a certain thing or to not say a certain thing. And there is indeed evidence that the Torah has been edited. One specific example we're going to talk about is in regard to Mount Gerizim versus Mount Ebal. In the Samaritan Pentateuch, it says that when we enter into the land of Canaan, and once we cross the Jordan, that we're supposed to set up an altar and sacrifice upon that altar on Mount Gerizim. Now, the Masoretic text says the same thing, except it says we're supposed to do it on Mount Ebal. So we have a clear difference here. We have a actual difference in manuscripts, a difference that we can see. And obviously this means that there was a change at some point. Now, as to the exact details of that change and as to whether either one is the original reading, that is not told to us based on the existence of the difference. All we know is that there is a difference and there was a change at some point. Maybe the original manuscript reads Ebal, maybe the original manuscript reads Gerizim, or maybe it reads something different. We don't know. But by seeing this, we know that there was an edit. We know that this issue, that there's a difference in manuscripts on this issue, and therefore to say that the Torah was edited on this issue, we have evidence of it. Now, we need to draw a distinction, though, between actual evidence of an edit and assuming edits to the Torah. So I'm going to talk about a specific example that I've witnessed. I've witnessed a lot of different situations where this goes on in varying scopes, varying degrees, and varying behaviors as a result. So the example I'm going to focus on is a person believed that the text must have been edited to not treat animals like people. So apparently they had this belief that animals are people too, kind of thing, and that the priests must have just liked barbecue, and so therefore to feed their desire for barbecue, they changed the law. And this is the belief that I heard being spoken of. And so let's kind of deconstruct what's going on here. So I guess the person must have had this belief that animals are people too. They believe that animals should be treated the same way as humans, and everything that goes along with that. Obviously, they wouldn't be eating animals or slaughtering animals in sacrifice. So they have this belief, and apparently they also had the belief that the God of Israel is the real God. And his Torah, at least originally, was the direction that the people were supposed to walk in, was the command and the right way. Now, as we know, these two beliefs do not fit together. The belief that the animals are people too, human sacrifice is treated as a disgusting thing in the Torah, so the fact that animals are sacrificed and not people kind of is a big problem with this belief. And so we know that these don't fit together. But the way that the person had worked it out was that, well, the Torah was edited, and maybe they knew about other edits. I don't know. Maybe they knew about the Gerizim Ebal issue. So, okay, the Torah is edited. My belief is true. The Torah must have been edited to exclude my belief. And so the assumption that a preconceived belief that we already had was, originally in the law. I mean, it was true, so it must have been originally in the law if we believe the original law was true. And then it was edited, and so now it doesn't say that anymore. And of course, in the process, we're constructing a story, and we're constructing this idea of what an original manuscript said. And so the story in this case was the priests liked barbecue, therefore they edited the text. And therefore we have this idea in the situation, there was this original manuscript that taught this belief that animals are people too. So this goes on in a lot of different ways, and I think all of us have experienced this in one way or another. We just didn't necessarily respond to it in the same way. Most of us, and probably none of us, have ever actually lived in a Torah society. Most of us have not lived in the Torah society, and we were not raised in it. Instead, we were raised in a different culture. We were brought up and were exposed to a lot of different ideas and different beliefs that are not supported by the Torah. And so we have additionally experiences and personal conclusions that we come to along the way. Then for most of us, at some point we realized that what we believed about God was not correct, and that instead the Torah is his way, that the God of Israel is the real God, and that we need to be following him according to his commandments. And so we realized that, and most of the time, probably 99% of us have experienced this probably multiple times. We had some belief that we brought into our new understanding of God, new understanding of what we're supposed to do. We had some belief here, whether it was about animals, about idols. Maybe we were idol worshippers before. And so we're looking at the Torah and we see, oh, idol worship is bad. I guess I'll change this belief about idol worship. And so a lot of us have been in these situations in minor ways or otherwise, and we've realized that, okay, the Torah teaches something different. I guess I'm going to modify this old belief I had. And a lot of us have experienced this in one way or another, and probably almost all of us have in at least some small way. However, in this case, we're talking about a very strongly, closely held belief. Belief that animals are people too obviously was a very strong belief. And it was so strong that instead of adjusting that belief, the person was adjusting this belief that, well, the text must have been edited because it doesn't teach this belief. And we can get into doing this in all sorts of ways, and I've witnessed people do it as well. I mean, they obviously just took the different direction. And a lot of times how it manifests, people will think, well, I don't really think that God wants us to do such and such. And so instead of them actually assuming an edit, they just assume that what it says is wrong for one reason or another and don't really think too much about it. They just ignore that part of the text. But some people go so far, and I've even seen people go so far, to actually reconstruct their imagination of what the text should have originally said. And then they start believing it so much that they actually pass it off as legitimate manuscript. I've seen this seemingly go on. And so if we're not careful about this, we can get into doing this ourselves. And it doesn't really matter what our intentions are. It doesn't really matter how intelligent we are. It doesn't even matter how much we know the text. We can recognize that, well, there was an edit, and so therefore that must mean that the text was edited because I have this belief. And if we're not careful about it, we start thinking that this imagined text, this imagined original manuscript that we're constructing from our personal beliefs, we can start to think that it is actually self-evident. We can start comparing it to, for example, the Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal issue. The Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal issue is real evidence. It's real evidence of there being an edit. It's real evidence of there being a difference. This imagined manuscript is not real evidence. It's something we've imagined. Now, indeed, the text could have been edited on certain other issues, and we just don't know. But the thing is that a lot of times we hold these beliefs They didn't come from the Torah in any sense. And so inserting them in does not make them Torah. A lot of times it's probably an issue of our own understanding. It's a deficiency in our understanding. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about intentions. A lot of us can get into the idea that we have good intentions and therefore that kind of justifies what we're doing. And I don't know how people have come up with this idea. Maybe movies and TV have influenced it. The idea that the bad guy knows that he's the bad guy. That there's this guy that's doing the bad stuff, and he knows what he's doing is bad, and he fully intends to do the bad thing. And we think that whenever we're doing something like editing the text, adding to or taking away from the law, which is prohibited in Deuteronomy 4:2 and 12:32, that we have the good intentions. So therefore, if we're saying that the law was changed, even though we don't have evidence, that therefore, because we're doing it pure of heart, that it's okay, that's not really changing it. That's kind of a big problem, because in a way it's going after the dictates of our heart and assuming that we know better than what it says. Now, of course, the way that we're justifying that is because we're restoring the original text. But people have been doing this kind of thing for years. Back almost 2,000 years ago, this is kind of in regard to the New Testament, but there was a guy that was around, and he decided that the New Testament that they are actually teaching was to worship some other god. And he believed that this was actually the right way. He believed that they should be worshiping a different god. And so he actually reconstructed part of the New Testament and changed it, rewrote it to be what he thought was the original teaching. And it can be easy to look at that guy and say, oh, well, he was, obviously he was wrong. He's doing the wrong thing. And that's kind of an irrelevant issue to us. It's not relevant to what we're doing. But I'm pretty sure he probably had good intentions. He probably thought what he was doing was the right thing. That's how a lot of people go. Most people think they're doing generally the right thing, or at least that they have a pure heart and that they are trying to do the right thing. And for example, I talked to a pastor one time, and he basically told me that he thought Deuteronomy 30 was a false prophecy. He basically said it didn't mean what it said, it wasn't true, and that obviously this was a problem for his beliefs if it was true. And so he was saying that it was essentially a false prophecy. And I don't think that he had ill will in doing that. I don't think he thought he was being deceitful by his teachings to people, teachings to his church. I think he genuinely thinks that he's doing the right thing. I think he genuinely thinks that he's helping people by doing this. Same thing with, for example, false prophets. I think most false prophets probably think that they're doing the right thing. I had a friend that he was actually someone who brought me to some initial awareness of the Torah and was really influential in me becoming even aware that the Torah mattered. And it later was revealed, it later became apparent that he had falsely prophesied. And he was adding to the law and taking away from the law. And I don't think that he thought he was doing that. I think he thought he was doing the right thing. And so it can be easy to think that since we are doing this pure of heart, that we're trying to reestablish our imagination of what the original manuscript said. We think that something was edited based upon this belief that we hold, and what we're doing, we're not adding to the law, we're not taking away from the law, but we're just kind of fixing things to what they were before. When in reality, we don't have this Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal type evidence, and we don't have evidence that there was an edit in the regard to the subject we're talking about. Instead, we will find evidence for that belief. This is just how people work. A psychological phenomenon called confirmation bias is just a way that our mind operates. Everyone is susceptible to it. Everyone does it. In confirmation bias, essentially, we can find validation for any belief that we hold. Now, obviously, some people are more open-minded or more susceptible to incoming information, but we are all susceptible to confirmation bias. And so if we are very convinced of this possible edit of the text, we will find evidence for it, even though it's not Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal type evidence. We'll see what we might consider footprints of proof that the edit occurred, or there's little remnants of information that imply our belief was originally there. And we're going to see that no matter what the belief is, because we believe this is true, so we're going to see validation for it. The problem is that every belief that everyone has cannot be true, because we're talking about conflicting beliefs. And so it doesn't matter how true we believe it is. If we don't have evidence, we're probably getting into changing the law. That's not allowed. So we need to be cautious about this. We need to be cautious about editing the text or presuming that edits occurred at some point if we don't have evidence. Because more than likely, if we don't have evidence of it, it's fine if we have a question about it, but probably a lot of times it's going to be a deficiency in our understanding. A lot of times we need to look at maybe a belief that we hold is not as true as we once thought it was, for example, or maybe there's some understanding issue that needs to be resolved. So we need to be careful about this and careful about assuming edits, because if we don't really have evidence for it and we're just really building up this vivid image of what the original manuscript must have said, we're probably getting into adding to and taking away from the law. And if we're teaching people to do that, we're teaching people to add to or take away from the law. So we need to be very careful about this, very careful for ourselves and also for others. So the text indeed has been edited. There is legitimacy to having questions about the text, uncertainty about certain things. I personally have questions about the text. But if we just assume that we know what really should be going on, then we are assuming something we don't have evidence for. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like this video and to share it because you watched to the end, and because by doing so it will give this issue more attention, more awareness, and allow for people to give it more thought. And feel free to subscribe if you have not already, so that we can stay in touch, and because by subscribing I will know that you indeed are watching. So thanks for watching. Remember the commands. Peace.